is Friday, September the 28th, 2018, and we're in the studio here with Jane Curtis. So we're going to find out a little bit about this woman that seems to be just in the shadows of her husband, but she was a very fascinating person. So Jane, tell us about Einstein's wife.
Well, as a matter of fact, I'm giving you double your money because he had two.
Oh, he had two wives?
Not at the same time.
Not at the same time, okay.
No, but it's the first one that we're the most interested in. Now, everybody knows who Einstein was, and when I was younger and first heard of Einstein and all that, that must have been sometime, I don't know, in the 30s, late 30s, wartime. Einstein, well, it might have been 1955 at that. It might have been later when he died. But a lot of stories came out just as in our lifetime. It's gotten a lot better for women as far as women rights and being treated with respect and not swept under the rug and all that.
Right.
And the Me Too, we're right in the heart of the Me Too. So this is something that fits in rather well because his first wife was also a scientist.
Oh, okay.
And by a majority of accounts, actually better than he was, because math was her strength. She was also good in physics, but math too. And just as an overall picture of their lifetime, her lifetime, she started out strong, very, very intelligent, very, very learned, got together with Einstein in ways which we will see, and then gradually in the course of her life everything just went wrong. The main cause of it was Einstein himself. But this word that came out that I remember from when I first heard about him was that he was brilliant in one field, but he could do absolutely nothing. He was a dolt in everything else. Now,
typical absent-minded professor.
More or less. And couldn't care less about, the wild hair and so on. But he was known as sort of a kooky fellow from the beginning. Let's take a look at our first picture of his first wife, whose name was I can't quite see that. Mileva Malevich, or Mileva Maric. And she was born in Hungary in 1875. And the Balkans, Central Europe there was very kind of a, all right. What was a mixed area then, and of course it was all under the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Okay.
And where she was born was actually Hungarian territory, a little town known as Titel. And she was raised, her family was not rich or anything, but comfortable and well-to-do. So at a very, very early age, they discovered that she had a brilliant mathematical mind. She also painted very well. She was a musician, such a good one that later on she helped make a living as teaching music. But here's this little girl anyway. The teachers at the school say this child is one in a million. She's really got a mind in there. And sure enough, they did not withdraw her from school. And when the time came to go on to the next level of schooling, they applied to put her into a school in Zagreb, which was later, in our day, Yugoslavia, but still all part of the empire then, where Serbian was spoken. Of course, she had probably grown up knowing both Hungarian and German, because everybody seemed to know German as a common language then, like English now, sort of, in that area. But they made a special dispensation and let her in, where she came out top of the class in physics and in mathematics, but especially mathematics. She just had a grasp of it. So she went farther. She applied for higher school and was accepted. But this had to be in Switzerland because nowhere else would allow women in their advanced courses.
Right.
And it was at this time that she first met Albert Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
And Albert was a German, a Jewish German. Her family was not Jewish. And he was also, nobody is slacking on his mind. He was wonderful. Really a very, very good mind. The problem was that hers was better.
Oh.
And she really outshadowed him a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But they met at any rate. And they were the only two who were really at that level. And they met a lot, studied together, which of course is common in graduate schools, and became more and more attached to each other. And she was a very serious-minded person. Could we go back for 1 second? I wanted to look a little more at just how she looked at her. Yeah, as a young woman. She's not a raving beauty, but on the other hand, she's an attractive person. And you can't tell a book by its cover. Of course, you can't say, oh, look at that intelligent face. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, she was very intelligent and very serious-minded.
She looks like a person who would question everything.
Well, and indeed, yeah, she was in these scientific things. But see, so here she is, Miljeva Maric, and in Hungarian it was Mariti, apparently. Interesting thing. Became important later when the question of who wrote what, contributed to what, came up. Mm-hmm. But in that next picture then, you see her and Albert, and this was, I guess later in their student days. Albert was 4 years younger. He was born in 1879 in Ulm, I think, near Munich anyway, raised in Munich. And he had a little time in Italy when his parents were there business-wise. But basically he went to school and got these great grades. But somewhere I read that in the five subjects that they were rated on in the entrance exams, he was brilliant on math and physics and just zilch on some of the others. So not too balanced a person. Mm-hmm. But this is no slam against him.
Right.
It just stating facts.
It can be very typical, really. Yeah.
It could be very typical, yes, it could.
Because if you're interested in something and really want to go after it, you'll do well. And if you're not interested, it just sort of falls by the wayside.
It does. But most people, I think, are balanced. At least if they're serious students, they're balanced enough that they're not going to fail.
Right.
And then some of these others are going to squeak by, if nothing else.
Right.
But they met. And sparks didn't fly instantly, but as they got together more and more often, they did form more of a relationship. And they have letters of his that were accidentally, a cache of letters that accidentally found later, in an old folder or something like that. And these show that he had actually, here's a good picture of the two of them again. Both of them bent on things. They're firm people. They don't look like wishy-washy people at all. But Albert went for more on the physics side, and she was very powerful in both mathematics. And it began to be that she would handle a lot of the math. And of course the math there was difficult. This was a very important period where the electromagnetic topic had really come into question, into research. People were fascinated. And he'd been working on, I think, capillaries, why the water rises in a straw, place a straw in the water will also rise in. Well, he did some work on that and had written a couple of papers. But they pursued this electromagnetic question, and she was doing most of the, as somebody put it, the heavy lifting on the math side, although knowing both. Well, after they had been attending school together for some time, she decided that she did not want to go for going off with Albert and kind of forgetting everything. She wanted to go for this career and pursue it. And she saw things tending the way they eventually did tend. But she went off to Heidelberg in Germany. Now, Heidelberg would not grant degrees to women, but they would allow women to participate in their courses.
The classes. Oh.
And this was very crucial because she met some scientists there who were the cutting edge of what was going on at that point. Well, Albert was lost without her and said in letters she had to come back and he missed her and he needed her working together, filling out. And she didn't really want to, but she eventually did because Heidelberg would not give her a degree, any kind of a degree. So she went back and they were living in Zurich. And unfortunately, time took its toll, and she wound up having a baby. And he was working. I think he was already a employee in the patent office in Zurich, in Switzerland, for which you have to take exams, which he passed. And the two of them had already passed some entry exams with no trouble at all. But they then took a more advanced exam, going to higher level, and they tied. And I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but I remember the passing grade was 5, and then it was 4.9. They each got 4.9, and each one of them, the strengths lay a little bit differently inside. Mm-hmm. Well, so these bearded gentlemen, and we're all male board, of course, decided they would up his grade by 1/10 of a point, give him a 5, and just leave her alone.
4.9.
So this counted as flunking. Mm-hmm. Now, in Germany, she had met some important scientists, including a Professor Weber. He's not one of the big names like Maxwell and some of them at the time, but through his influence, she had an excellent position in this field, which Albert did not. Albert was sort of a hand-to-mouth at that point. What happened was that they let her take exams again, and she did not pass them. She had all kinds of problems at the time, not only being pregnant, but they were not nice. Her family was supporting her, keeping up with her, but his family was not. They didn't like her because she was an intellectual woman, and they could probably see she could equal Albert, if not outshine him.
And she wasn't a Jew.
And she wasn't a Jew, exactly right. But there was some other reason. I think it had to do with, perhaps with her musical side. Now, Albert allegedly liked music. And I know in a PBS special that came out many years ago now, but in that, when you show him with a violin, it's sort of a leitmotif in the background. You know, Albert in these virtuoso positions in this violin. But the outcome of that was that they finally did marry, but his parents were deadly against it and didn't accept her very well. Mm-hmm. The baby turned out to be a little girl who was named Liesel, and history doesn't tell us exactly what happened to her. Now, you have some reports from some of her girlfriends, our school friends, but there was a scarlet fever epidemic raging, so possibly she died of that. Mm-hmm. And this would have been in the 80s, 90s, yeah. My own grandmother lost 2 babies to scarlet fever, or 2 little girls. But alternatively, he was getting this position in the patent office, and he wanted to rise to a higher grade. He started out 3rd rank or 3rd class, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And he knew his career would be deadened if he would have an illegitimate child going on. Mm-hmm. So he insisted upon marrying. His family didn't like it at all. Her family, meanwhile, said, this has gone too far. They would support her as long as she was using her gifts, exploiting, becoming somebody. But they withdrew support. So allegedly, she and Albert kept working together evenings, carrying on their scientific work as usual, and making great strides, as a matter of fact. But what happened, she went back home for some reason or other, and she discovered that she was pregnant again. So came back, and of course they were married by now, so that wasn't so bad. But she had a baby to worry about, and he apparently required spoon feeding. Albert did. Oh. So she was. You can imagine how much time she had and how much concentration. Either she would have had to drop all that, or she had to make a crucial choice, and he didn't help any. So it's gotten to be 1900, when he put out some kind of a little paper in 1901. There's a German society, the Annals of Physics, and this was the place to have things published. And so Albert had something published there. But they're allegedly working together, making progress. Comes the year 1905. In the meantime, they've had a little boy, so she has this baby on her hands as well. The subjects of her papers, of his papers, he put them out, 3 of them, in 1905, and they were all published and all very well accepted. And many people have questioned how this man, who could, even a good mind and experience, how he could have put out these 5 highly detailed, requiring a lot of thought and a lot of mathematics. How he could have put them out. And he had said himself a number of times, she did the mathematics. She was responsible for that. And what they were doing was uniting 2 theories, the electromagnetic, and science was very concerned with that. And his famous equation combined them, in a sense. So other scientists are taking note, and one scientist was a Soviet-Russian physicist named, we would pronounce it Joffe, Abraham Joffe. And Joffe read these things, and he had also seen the pre-publication papers. And the pre-publication papers indicated a hyphenated name for the author. The hyphenated name was not just Eisenstein, it was Eisenstein-Mariti. And Mariti apparently is some Hungarian or other version of Maric. And that's the way it was made up and written. So, in other words, it was not entirely his own work. Now, there's a story that sometimes in Switzerland, a man would attach his wife's maiden name to his name, so that name would continue. That has really not been so much disagreed with. What was disagreed with, and much later, in Einstein's old age or later age, a lot of papers had been destroyed in the war, and they wanted him to rewrite by hand, his thesis by hand, which wasn't bad because scientific things, I think that was only 2 or 3 pages long, that famous one. They're not tons and tons of text. The key thing is these mathematical formulas. So he wrote it, but when it came to that point of originator, he would not put the hyphenated name. So a lot, it reminds you somewhat of this tragic thing that's going on now. Only this one there, I think there was a lot more evidence that she was, certainly 50% of the brains of the outfit, if not more. But in the meantime, she is going steadily downhill scientifically. They have another baby in 1910, another little boy, who later turns out to be schizophrenic and has to be institutionalized. But he got the Nobel Prize in, I think it was 1909. Anyway, later in the aughts there, of the 1900s, he got the prize, and he had wanted to divorce her because he had taken up an affair with his cousin, And another picture we have, let's see some of the pictures again. We can see a picture, the next one I think will be the two, yeah, there are the two little boys. And there she is, already looking
A little worn.
kind of old and worn, yeah, and not that bold look. This is a cartoon, and this, some cartoons came out later. Now, what it says on there is
Mileva, what's coming next?
yeah, Mileva, what's coming next? And in other words, how do I do the math on this? Another cartoon that, unfortunately, I had a computer problem and I lost my copy of that. But the other, we can go under that picture. But the other cartoon showed an attractive young woman, you know, sitting in a cross-legged position, high-heeled shoes, a kind of flirty look on her face, and the head on the body is Einstein.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
this was not just a fly-by-night in some back schoolroom, but it was a definite idea that she had done an awful lot of that work and was responsible. Well, what may have happened, she may have traded her interest in that for a divorce, because finally she realized it was going to be the best thing. He would not come back during World War I. It so happened that she was in Zurich and he was in Berlin visiting his lady friend in Berlin, and World War I began and they couldn't join. But he did later go back to Zurich, but he did not go back to her. And he had turned very, very cruel. There's a list which survives, a list of the conditions under which he would resume residence in their home. And it had to look from the outside as though they were a happy family. She could speak only when spoken to. These things sound medieval. She had to prepare 3 meals a day. She had an entire care of the children. She had to keep the apartment in good living condition. In other words, she had become a slave.
Yeah.
And she didn't want that. Well, she made this deal anyway, where she allegedly, and possibly so, traded her right in that whole situation for the money. And some sources tell us that he took part of it back. Other sources say she had enough that she could buy an apartment building in Zurich and get some income there, and also tutor in mathematics and in music. So she's trying to keep these 2 children going. Einstein accuses her of trying to alienate the affections of the 2 children, which was sort of nonsense. But the younger one became more and more destructively unbalanced. And he eventually tried to kill her. She had not wanted to institutionalize her. She had a heart. She did not want to institutionalize that child. And when he became a teenager, but she eventually was forced to. The other boy, by now it's the late 1930s, and bad things on the horizon. The other boy had just married and went off to the New World, to the United States. Nobody really knows. Now, with his second wife, now please could we have that picture? Yes. This is his cousin, Eva, and she was also Jewish. The family approved. Of course, the family was partly gone by that time. Yeah. And he has already entered this I am the boss phase, you know, the hair flying and so on. They had 3 children together, and they did not turn out to be following the scientific footsteps. But this whole thing, it heightens the, as in the present situation. Why should one person be trodden down by the other? In many instances, both are equal. In this instance, I think it was not, because her friend said she idolized him at first. She loved him very much. And she stuck by him through a lot of this. And he was the one actually who was demanding the divorce because he wanted to marry his cousin, which indeed happened. the cartoons that came out, I guess there was quite a rage of tearing him down. And again, there's been a lot of that. Perhaps I shouldn't say tearing him down, but all the things came, the very undesirable side came out. Look at, for instance, the big Eisenhower, for instance, and his lady friend. Was that a justified thing? Was it not? Is it true that he broke that off because he wanted to be president, and the Republicans wouldn't nominate him if he had that? This is not new at all.
Yeah.
But when you see somebody just forced downhill like that, she eventually had some sort of depression. I guess not a clinical depression, but you can understand.
Oh, sure.
How much laughing she would be doing. And then when the elder boy, I think they were not terribly close anyway, but he was there. I mean, they were together and so on. But when he was gone, there she was. So she eventually had a stroke. This was, I guess, already in 1948. The war had ended. Meanwhile, of course, Einstein had paid little or no attention to the family and was not sending them support. I think when they were first divorced, some payments were made when she was in Zurich, trying to run this apartment complex and a boarding house, care for the children and all that. She must have been terribly depressed.
I would imagine, not being able to pursue her first love.
Yeah, it's just, but he wasn't paying any attention. And she, I guess the strain just got too much for her. I think she lost the apartment building some way during the war, and it got worse and worse. I don't know if her family was still alive then, if she still had relatives, possibly not. Of course, World War II had swept over everything at that point, destroyed a lot of records as well. But she never put in any claims for it. I guess she stayed with the agreement, the divorce agreement, that she did not put out later and say, well, I really did this. And possibly she could have proved it. There may have been other documents too, in addition to this one that Jaffe was found and pointed out. And I saw a close-up of a letter he wrote. And the letter was to some one of the publications, I believe. And the letter was in Russian, but the titles and all were in English. And he had this hyphenated name. And this was supposedly, he had gotten this directly from a pre-copy of Einstein's famous dispatch.
Okay, well, it sounds like she had kind of a rough life.
Well, she did. And it's, the same thing keeps happening. This just happenstance that it happens while all this is going on in our world. But it just makes you wonder. Well,
it's fascinating. Life seems to go on and doesn't seem to change much.
It does, and humanity gets trodden under so much. But we'll try for a happier subject.
It's a happier one next time. Okay, thanks a lot, Jane.
You're welcome.